bringing you the absolute best stories across the ag industry. You're now tuning into How I Built This Ag Business, an original series by AgSwag.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of How I Built This Ag Business. We're on here today with Willard Jack and Jeremy Jack with Silent Shade Planting Company. Their farm began in 1979 when Willard and Laura Jack immigrated from Ontario to the Mississippi Delta. They now grow cotton, corn, soybeans, and rice. And with that, I'd like to welcome both of them to the show.
Thanks for having us today.
We appreciate the opportunity to visit.
Yep, thanks for being on. So I guess let's start this podcast off with Willard kind of telling us if you could share what was going on in Canada. Were you guys farming before this, and kind of why you guys ventured down to the south of the United States?
So I was born and raised and farmed until I was 29, coming up 30 when I moved to the Mississippi Delta. The reason for the move was we were looking to gather the opportunity to put the larger blocks of land together. Mississippi Delta at that time, there's a lot of 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 acre blocks. There was the ability to water. We had a lot of water here. It wasn't overly developed. There was lots of potential and lots of opportunities, we thought at that time, to move here. So we picked up stakes. I had a daughter and a son just born and moved here in the fall of '79 and went home for a little while that winter. And my wife was expecting, had her second child. Upon the birth of my second child, moved down here and started over fresh. So it was quite a challenge back in the day, but it's been very rewarding to us.
So did you guys get started right in the middle of the farm crisis, or?
Just about, as we couldn't plan it any poorer if I had to. We hit right there in the early 80s. We had a drought, borrowed money, interest rates went to 23%. Everything you could go wrong went wrong. Of course, as I told somebody, that's an opportunity. You have to understand that when things are bad, you look around and try to figure out where can you go from here. We couldn't go down, so we kind of struggled a little bit. Took some opportunities. There were some opportunities come along. Started to grade land, buy some more land, and just see if we couldn't double down. It's kind of like gambling. You get down, so you double down to see if you can't go again.
Yeah. I remember my grandpa always said, when I was starting out, he's like, that's when you got to take risk. You got to take risk when, things are bad and it's against you. He said, doesn't hurt very bad falling out of the basement window, It hurts a little worse when you're way up high. So I always remember that. He's right. You got to take risk down there. So for sure. Good stuff.
So what did
you don't have any, there's nothing to lose.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing to lose.
So what you guys how many acres you guys start with when you first started the farm down there? And what were you growing too?
So when we moved down here, we were growing 1,000 acres of cotton. Within a year, I got to growing a little bit of rice and a little bit of cotton, as well as soybeans. The big crop was soybeans when we started. Then we got to growing cotton and rice. We got to put some irrigation in. Within 3 or 4 years, we bought some land and started to grade it and grow straight levied rice. And then I got to growing a little bit of corn, likely one of the earlier corn farmers in the Mississippi Delta. So we just kept working away and kept pounding on that irrigation and improvement in the land. So that's kind of where we just started from there and worked on forward to where we're at today.
And so you guys were one of the early corn growers. Why wasn't very many people growing corn down there?
Well, back in the day, there likely wasn't very many varieties that were suitable to grow. Our climate still isn't the best place to grow corn. And the government, everybody here was either a cotton grower or a rice grower. Nobody claimed to even be a soybean grower, let alone a corn grower. So that was very, very, it was just foreign to everybody here. Everybody grew cotton or rice. That was the two crops they grew.
So what was it like, Jeremy? If you want to jump in the conversation, what was it like growing up on the farm back then?
You know, growing up in the early '80s, I would say, and it wasn't really all sunshine and rainbows. It was a tough time, but you know, we didn't know any different. It could have been just as pleasant as my kids growing up now, and a lot. I don't know if now's a good time to grow up either. I'll put it that way. But we all grew up working on the farm. My brother, my sister, and I, from a young age. We helped out where we could. I don't know if we were much help, but we were out there. We learned to irrigate. We learned to cultivate. You know, as I told someone, for numerous summers, my brother and I walked rice levees and set rice gates and carried around irrigation pipe and irrigated corn and soybeans and cotton. And my sister mixed chemicals on for the cultivators and hauled water back and forth. You know, technology and efficiency and productivity with equipment has changed dramatically, and we've improved our systems a lot. I always tell someone back then we worked really hard, but we never accomplished a lot every day. If you look at what you can do with a high boy sprayer or a planter in today's time, or we don't even put levees in our rice field now. So there was, you know, half of my childhood or a quarter of my childhood's just gone. We don't even do those practices anymore. And I think a lot of the reasons we don't is we did those things and we had to find better ways of doing it, newer ways of doing it, because it costs too much money to do them as labor got more expensive, or as my dad said, we all got ready to go to college, and we had to figure out easier ways of doing this because there was no more kids to come back to the farm to work anymore. And but you know, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I enjoyed my time on the farm, and it helped us to learn and have a work ethic. And but like I said, it was really hot and really hard back then. And I tell the guys now that they have no idea how easy they have it. You know, when it's 110 degrees outside and 100% humidity, I was like, this is easy. I mean, you get to get in the air conditioner a little bit. You know, there's a rollout pipe, and that you don't have to carry irrigation pipe around or carry a pivot tire all the way out into the middle of a cornfield. Just a lot harder back then than it was today in today's time.
Yeah, I think as parents too, we all try to make it a little bit easier on our kids, and hopefully they didn't have to do it as hard as we had to do it. I tell everybody, hell, I remember throwing hay for a penny a bale for a long time, and shit, I'd work all day and be out there dying, and get done, you get like $5, you know, if you were lucky. So I'm telling you, it definitely has gotten a little different and a lot easier. I would say that for sure.
Yeah, I remember we had when Palmer amaranth became resistant to Roundup. You know, as a kid, we grew up, and there was always, you know, went out and you had to chop cotton, you had velvet leaf, you had cockleburs, and there was these weeds out in the field that you chopped, and you didn't really, I would say, you never felt like you did. It was a lot of hard work, but you felt like you could see progress across the field to get those escapes out. I took a crew of 10 guys out to a soybean field, and we worked really hard for 4 hours. Everybody was pissed off, and we didn't look like we had done a thing. And we had, you know, like, this doesn't work anymore. I don't know what happened when we were younger, but we could do this, but we can't do this anymore.
I hear you. I agree.
You don't think you and Jordan could go throw some hay bales for a penny a piece?
Well, I can go throw some, but I'll be done pretty damn quick. I'll tell you that. I tell my wife, I said, I remember working with the old boys, and I'd be like, man, these old guys got to get in here. And, you know, shit, it'd be 100 degrees, and some of them bale that hay wet as hell, and it'd be heavy, you know. And I'm like, get off that tractor, come down here and help me, you know. And they were, you know, they're probably in their 50s, 60s. And hell, now I said, no, I ain't getting off no tractor to come down and throw. You throw away. So I hear you. It definitely changes as we get older. Look back. But yeah, I'm with you though. It was always fun to look back, and shit, you'd work a whole day. I mean, you know, we'd work from sun up till sundown, and, you know, you'd think you're never making any progress. And at the end of the day, kick back with some lemonade or something, look back across there, and you did a whole lot of work. So it was always rewarding, I thought. And, you know, I think a lot of kids these days too, a lot of them have all this anxiety and all kinds of other stuff. I feel like they got out there and just, you know, did a lot of hard work. I don't remember having any when I was young. That's for damn sure. So just working all the time.
You're way too tired to have time to think about anything else.
You're right. You're right. So
you left the farm, Jeremy, after you went off to college. Did you play football at Mississippi State, or?
That's correct. We always made the joke that work was so hard that, you know, SEC football practice seemed like a dream. So my brother and I, we both, we played a little bit of JUCO, and we played on, at Mississippi State, and we used the words play as we were on the team. We did letter, but we were not, you know, starters, all-stars, or we had a number. But you gotta think there's 100 numbers on a football team too. So there's only 12 guys that can play. We were one of the ones on the first. We were a higher number than the other guys, but it was good. You know, as I told someone, that you think of growing up on a farm, and every day you get up to go to work, and then you go to college, and when you played football, or you had something like that that was so demanding, you never really had time to stop and, like you said, have anxiety, this, that, and the other. You had, you know, practice at 5 o'clock in the morning, or weights at 5 o'clock, and then you'd run in the mornings or work out, and then you had to come back for film for at least an hour a day. Then you had a 3 to 4 hour practice in the afternoon. It didn't leave just a whole lot of time. Besides, by the time you went to class, did your homework, you were back to practice again. And I told someone I played all throughout undergrad and graduate school. And then my last semester, I didn't have to play football anymore. And I was like, I had no idea college was that much fun. But it's probably a good thing I didn't know it was that much fun. I wouldn't have been there for as long as I was. I would have been back to the farm probably a lot quicker. But I think it was good for me to help keep the discipline. And then when I got out of college, you know, grow up on a farm, you build a lot of discipline. You do a sport or an activity that requires that much discipline, you just kind of, that becomes the way you live life. And it was good for me, and I would say my brother also. And give a shout out to my sister. She was in the band, so we became Mississippi State fans pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then after school, did you go to work in DC, or was that your brother? Or?
That was me. That went up and worked for Senator Thad Cochran, and it was a short period of time during that time that I was up there, and that's actually where I met my wife Elizabeth. Was in the office. She was about 3 offices down from there, and she did not go to Mississippi State, so we did not run in the same circles. And we always make the joke that I came from a farm and went to Mississippi State, and she came from the city and went to Ole Miss, and we had to meet in D.C. because we were completely out of our elements, especially myself, to get to where we'd go on a date together. And but it worked out well for us. And you know, the one thing that we talk about is, we've even discussed this on the thing, is my brother, he decided he didn't want to come back to the farm, and he went into the turf grass business in South Florida. My sister didn't want to come back to the farm originally. She went and got her accounting degree and was an accountant. And I went to DC because I enjoyed policy work and politics. And but when I was up there, 2 things happened. Dad's health was he was going through some cancer treatments around that time, and it was tough on him. And there might not have been a farm to come back to if I didn't want to come back to. So I came on back, but the decision is, do I want to really live in an area like Washington, D.C. and raise and grow a family there, or do I want to farm and raise and grow a family on a farm? And that was the main decision maker. I didn't have a family at the time. That wouldn't come for years later, but I knew down the road that was a lifestyle. That was the career that I wanted, was something that I could teach my kids how to work like my parents taught us how to do. And not that you have just a whole lot of flexibility. It's not like there's a 4-month vacation time and it's an 8 to 5 job that you get to work remotely. You work remotely, but it's just out of the office in the fields. And that's one of the things that I think was interesting to me. And then my sister was the second to come back to the operation. She had young kids, and tax season was very demanding, and the farm allowed her flexibility somewhat. She probably works harder than she did the whole year instead of just during the tax season. But you get a lot more enjoyment of owning your own business and working, and I think in the agricultural world. But also you have that flexibility of having a good team to where you can leave and someone can fall in for you. So it's a plus. It's a win-win. And then Elizabeth, we convinced her to come back to, as she says, do all the things that we didn't want to do.
That's a good one. That's how we did it. I mean, my wife ended up getting a big time job in Chicago, and hell, I didn't know anything about trading. I was working for the NFL at the time, and they hired me in Chicago basically because I was tall and big and everybody could see me. And they said you could get orders off a lot easier at the exchange and shit. Then we had kids, and, we just, nothing against Chicago. It's a fun place to visit. We just didn't want to raise the kids there and grow up there. So we moved back to a small hometown where we grew up. And that was kind of the main reason there. We just wanted to raise the kids, more rural environment, and, just have them get out there and work and do a lot of things we did growing up. So yeah, similar type story, but yeah, we're glad we did. So it's all worked out for the best.
Well, I've always said it's the most rewarding and probably the most challenging thing you'll ever do is working with your family.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're right. Yeah, very true. We're learning that as we go on the fly, Jeremy. We have several ag businesses we started up. Now my daughter's coming back home. She was up in New York. She wanted to test that out for a while. She got her big time architect degree, and she was up there in New York. She was working out of the World Trade Center. And then last week, she moved home about a month ago. And then last week we had her up in Wisconsin at a farm show, and she's like, what in the hell has happened here? From the big city office out to the old farm shows. It's definitely, she's going to be well-rounded. So just like you guys.
You're so lucky.
Exactly. So lucky. Too funny.
So what the farm looked like when you went back to it, Jeremy?
I would say, my parents had really, as Ed mentioned earlier, they'd put together they'd come down here for the opportunity of growth. And through the years as a family, we worked really close together. Mom and Dad put a lot of time and effort into building a really strong foundation for us that had a good trucking. We have a trucking company also that had a trucking company that had a reputation of great service, and they ran it very, very, and it was based off the size of the operation. So it was never going to be bigger than the size of the operation needed or smaller, but it was based off of what the needs of the farm. And but it had a reputation of doing work outside the farm that is still that we base the business off today. And they had an operation that my mother and dad could live off, and they were able to send all of us to school off of. And we came back and helped them whenever we can, but they did a lot of good work with that. And we came back, and I would say one of the things Dad sent me off to T-PAP probably the first or second year I came back and said, if you're going to run the farm, you need to understand how to run a farm. And he sent me over to see Danny Kleinfelter. First night there, the first time I went there, I actually spent just a lot of time with Danny and learned so much from him and had so much to owe from him. And it was probably, outside of college and local people, it was the first person I've met someone outside that just really spent a lot of time and understood agriculture really well. And Danny's had gotten to be a really close friend of ours, and I owe a lot to him. But so when we came back, I took all the ideas and thoughts that we had out there, and we started bringing them into the operation, and we started hitting growth. And about that time, Stacie came back, and we continued to hit more growth. And I would think we probably grew 6 times of what we were, about 4 times of what we were when we first came back. And the trucking business doubled over the next 10 years, and we grew more, had more grain bins that we added. And we had a long discussion yesterday about where our next growth is. So we grew tremendously in acres. We grew tremendously in complexity of the operation, but I feel like we've got more safeguards in place. We have more people in place. We're not as, one thing that bothered us is when my dad bothered him when he came back and said he'd gotten sick. Well, who's going to come back and run the farm? And then my parents are retired now, and we're back now. We're like, we've got to have multiple people behind. We have to have multiple depths in the operation because we can't have the operation stop because of one person. And so we have the more people here backing up everybody else. We've put a really good team together, and our growth now is not just in size as far as sheer number of acres or sheer number of pounds, but it's also how can we get better at what we're doing? How can we gain efficiencies? How can we do this by producing having the least amount of cost in each pound of product that we're applying? So, I hate to say the word, but a factory farm, but I mean, factories are very efficient manufacturers. And we're trying to do the same thing as we're trying to manufacture a good quality corn product, cotton product, rice product, soybean product that is safe for the end user and use the least amount of inputs as we can in there.
Makes sense. So what other businesses do you guys have? The trucking, the farming, or said the row crops, and is that mainly the main two?
Those would be the main two. We have ownership, as Dad mentioned earlier, into a cotton gin, and we have ownership into an aerial application business also. Okay. Our main two that are our big ones are the farm and the trucking.
Okay. You guys doing anything? You doing any non-GMO or organic stuff on the farm at all, or conventional?
We haven't. We live in what's the best way to put it, Dad? A botanical garden?
Yeah. It's hot, wet, and everything that can grow will grow here. Palmer amaranth will grow 2 inches a day.
Wow.
Diseases, insects, weeds, and as Dad's mentioned, in the past, he said, the escapes that he had, growing up just outside the Midwest or in the Midwest, what we consider escapes is what he considered pressures. So it's a lot more complexity to growing a crop here and growing. I mean, even we had non-dicamba beans. We had some enlist beans, and they got sprayed, I think, 10, 11 times. So wow. It's just the only crop that we have that's not Roundup ready is rice, and rice every year usually gets a little bit of Roundup drifted onto it. So it's and a lot of that has to do with inversions in the heat and humidity and winds blowing. So it's a very difficult area to manage, and as fast as things grow, it's hard to manage against. So you're managing weather and pressures.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to what you were saying too on T-PAP. I've never been, but boy, everybody I talk to just loves it and says it's one of the best tools they've ever gone and received, especially with and say the same about Danny and all he's done for people. So yeah, I think
I've been, my sister's been, and my wife has been, and we've all been to Apex. I was the president a couple of years ago, and I don't know if y'all heard, we got word yesterday that Danny passed away yesterday. So it was real sad. But I don't know if there's anyone that's done more for modern agriculture production than, especially from a business standpoint, than Danny Kleinfelter. Now I can make that argument all day long. And for me, he's done. I can't tell you how much he's done for myself.
I agree, and that's mostly the shortfalls I'd find. So I was blessed to be on Wall Street and learned a lot about business and business practices and a lot of those things from some really great CEOs and traders and investors. But boy, when I kind of went back home and got more ag centric and helping farmers and helping people on our side of the business, that really was the shortfall I would see when I'd go out and talk to people. It was just their business acumen. The farm, they worked their ass off and worked hard, but man, a lot of them just didn't have the business skills or the business training to make the farm as profitable as they could from a business standpoint. So yeah, I thought T-PAP, I always heard the folks I'd go out and visit who had been to T-PAP, let's put it this way, were a level and a step way ahead of many of the other folks. And I commend Danny and all their efforts, and you as well for being the president. For you guys keep putting that on and helping people really learn more about the business side of the operation. And I think that's awesome. So.
Yeah, and if anyone's listening, I would highly recommend stop what you're doing right now and go sign up for T-PAP. We've even had numerous conversations with guys that were in my group of going back again. And as we said, it would be kind of weird because we feel like we'd be cheating on the group of guys that we were there with, because you're with them for a whole week, 2 separate years. and you get to know everyone so well. But that was the first time you get out of your local area. And like for me, I was talking to grape growers, and there was a guy that was a mink farmer. I didn't even know they made those. You know, just you find all kinds of people across the U.S. that do what you do. They just do it differently, and you can learn from them. And it really just opens your mind to, you know, there's other things outside your local region.
Yeah. Yeah. Great peer groups, I guess what you call it. Yeah. I've heard the same from folks that went. So yeah, I'm with you. If you haven't been, I think, and you've got a farm and you're trying to grow the farm and you're looking for ways to improve, I would definitely suggest, signing up. So.
And I would say that's the one thing my parents, especially my father's, really pushed on us was continuing education, you know, throughout, you know, not just high school and college and graduate school, but even just continuing every year to go back and learn more. You know, if you don't understand enough about this topic of something that you're doing, if you need more agronomic work, go get more agronomic training. If you need more business training, get more business training, but continue to push on that. Dad's always been a big pusher on us, all of us, to do that. And I think his father was a big fan of it also.
I would agree. Jordan and I try to make a commitment to go to one or two conferences that aren't even in our wheelhouse, you know, that are just kind of out there, just completely something not in our wheelhouse, and just, you know, commit to going to one or two a year and just seeing if we can't learn from, you know, people in other industries or other sides of things, like you said there with the mink guys or the guys in the grapes and stuff like that. And, you know, I think that's all. It just helps to stir up your mind and make you think about your own operation in a little different perspective. So I think it's great.
So who was the first employee on the farm, Willard? Was it Jeremy, or did you guys have employees before Jeremy came back?
No, we had employees before Jeremy came back. Even as a child growing up, we always kept 2 or 3 men around. Back in that days, the rule in the Mississippi Delta was you had to be able to cultivate around in 3 days. So whatever you grow, and you had to have enough cultivating power and tractor power to get around about every 3 or 4 days when the weeds were growing bad. So we had tremendous weed pressure down there. So back in them days, we were all row crop, cotton and beans. We cultivated steady, sprayed underneath or sprayed over top, and ain't no telling how many hours we cultivated. So yeah, we always had two or three helpers, and we grew rice. And back then, rice was all levees, and as Jeremy said, we irrigated, and it was, you know, he grew around. I always used to have 2 or 3 fellas. I think most of the fellas I had back then, I hate to admit it, have all passed away. You know, as I've got older, I look around and I've lost a whole lot of helpers over the years. But I always enjoyed a lot of them. I worked a lot of them a lot of time. There's some of them long-term employees we had that worked 20, 30 years for me.
And you guys, how many you guys up to now? 25 or so, or?
Jeremy, I'll let you answer that question.
The whole team, when we have everybody here, it's 30 between the two businesses.
Wow. That's a handful. That's plenty to manage.
And it's, I think that's the complexity of our crops is numerous times, because we have 4 different crops, we start planting one crop, and then, you know, 2 months later, you're on 2 or 3 other crops, but you unhook your planter, and then you hook it up to a grain cart, and then you start harvesting. You harvest for 4 months too. So it's the seasons are just much longer here for us, and there's always something to be done. We'll start harvesting corn tomorrow, and I'm still watering corn today. Wow. So it gives you an idea of where we are, and we'll probably still be watering, unfortunately, corn next week too. But at 100 degrees, it does not take long for corn to dry out down here. And so we'll be harvesting all the way. Hopefully, we'll have everything done by October, but we'll probably be harvesting some cotton in October for sure. What
moisture does that corn come off at usually?
This will be around 28 to 30. We're going to kind of we have a little bit that we planted in February, that a couple hundred acres that we want to go ahead and get the kinks worked out this week. And then next week, we'll probably have another 500-600 acres to harvest. And then we just kind of, we plant our corn when we have good windows. Yeah. Or what we perceive as being a good window. You know, if you have a good window about a month after you did it. And that's, sometimes we can plant in February, but we'll plant from the end of February all the way up to the 10th to 15th of April. And at that point in time, we need to be planting soybeans. So those planters swap out and start planting soybeans. And then at the end of April, we need to have all of our soybeans planted and get ready to start planting our cotton. And by the first week of May, have all of our cotton planted.
Yeah. How you finding your help? Are you bringing anybody in on work visas, or are you just finding them down local?
We do both. We've been using the H2A program since, I think, 2008. We've been getting guys from South Africa to work with us. And
That's what I was going to ask you.
yeah, we use that program and have used it for years, and it's been really good to us. We've kept up with a lot of the guys that have, you know, my wife says, you know, some of these guys come up here as young boys and leave as men because they come in at 18, 19 years old and leave 23, 24, and then they go back, get married, have kids, and then they show us how old we're getting. But it's we've used that program for a while, and it's been really good for us. You know, that program's had a lot of success. There's a lot of people that are using the program, so it's not only in South African, but a lot of people use that program for Hispanic and different parts of agriculture.
Yeah. We've heard a lot of good success. There's more South Africans even going up more northern areas, and you know, their guys have had a lot of good luck with them. Said they're hard workers, a lot of them. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, what all are you guys doing on the trucking side of things? You guys mainly just hauling grain for yourselves, obviously, and then like other producers in the area, or?
So we've got like I said, we run our trucks, but we run our main business is to haul the grain and the fiber off the farm, and either to our bins to the gin, and then away from the gin, and just the whole logistics of fall harvest are the main purpose of the farm or the trucks. But we've over the years Dad and Mom developed a big fertilizer business of hauling a lot of fertilizer, liquid fertilizer to fields and dry fertilizer to fields. So if you're a chemical supplier or fertilizer supplier and you have a storage tank that needs to be filled once a year, they would do that. And then when it was time to go to the field, you had short windows, and you had producers that wanted their fertilizer brought to them, you know, 3 times a day, you know, they needed 3 truckloads a day. The trucks would haul it back and forth, and that was kind of the big business. Still is big business for us. And then if the Walmart needs to be built, we'll haul the dirt for the foundation for Walmart. If they're paving roads, we'll haul aggregates for that. I would say there's the business was designed around the 150-mile radius around us. If someone needed a truck, we tried to have a trailer that we could haul for it. I would say, Dad, you can chip in. The market has changed dramatically over the years, but we're still trying to provide a good service with good drivers and good equipment.
Well, it's like any business. The customer base changes, the customers change, the demand changes for different products. But as long as you can provide that service and keep good equipment and good personnel, there's always money to be made there. And then, like he said, the big reason for it is when we come fall, you can't have a combine sit. You got to have trucks, and you got to have those trucks get. What happened is, I tell them, the combines kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the trucks stayed the same size. So we have to have more equipment to get that stuff from a combine to a grain bin.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I just think it's important that you guys, great business lesson is that, and people are trying to figure this out more and more. It's, you know, getting the assets that you have sitting on the farm or any business that you have sitting idle. How can you turn that equipment or those assets into more profitable tools? And that's what you guys did with the trucking business. And, you know, there's a lot of farms that have a lot of grain hopper trucks sitting around that they're only using, you know, a fraction of the time or equipment a fraction of the time. And I think that's what you've seen happen with Uber or Airbnb, or, you know, you're just taking an asset that someone has and turning it into something that produces income or produces revenue. So, yeah, I think that's awesome.
Anything that we've seen where something has slowed us down or we've had to stop because of a reason, we get hyper focused on making sure that doesn't happen again. So, you know, the good thing is, like I said, we need our fertilizer when everybody else needs our fertilizer. So we'll have, when we go to the field, 1 or 2 trucks are just bringing our fertilizer to us. That'll stay dedicated to us, but then we use the rest of them to go help everybody else. But we always make sure that, or let's just say there's always a lineup, so you can get backed up. So we'll just go fill all of our stuff up when no one else is doing it. We just we try to work in the gaps that no one else is to make, as I told someone, I can order my fertilizer when everybody else does, but I know that if I order it 2 days before everybody else does, it's there, and I did it when my truck didn't need anything, so that truck was more profitable working for us, but it doesn't really matter. He's just more profitable, and that's what we try to look at is it doesn't matter what we're doing, how can we make it as efficient as we possibly can, and do it with less people, less trucks, less equipment, less inputs, and but still have the job done correctly.
Right. Yeah.
Are your drivers all running full time? So what you said, you had 8 drivers? Are they all full time? They just drive?
Yeah. So it's a commercial trucking business that is separate from the farm. That is that has full-time truck drivers. That the drivers don't go get on a combine or sweep a grain bin. They're moving. They're kind of like a pilot in an airplane. They need to be flying every day.
Mm-hmm.
And do you guys have a lot of turnover in drivers, or?
Yes, we have. I would say Elizabeth would be able to speak to the turnover. The rate of turnover has become less here recently. I think 1 year it was like I don't want to say a number, but it was a lot. It seemed like someone was getting oriented every day, and there still is a good turnover, and it seems like it's always 1 or 2. The first one in or the last one in is the first one out as far as the drivers go. And we have some guys that have worked with us for a long time. We had a couple of years ago, we had a driver that has started on the farm working with us and then moved over to the trucking business, and he passed away, unfortunately, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And but the big joke was, I think he came to go work on the farm when my mother was pregnant with myself, and we always joked that who was the last son my mother had, he was or I was, and because he was just with us for the longest time. So we do have some great long-term employees, and we still, like everybody else, we struggle with. There's just not a whole list of really great guys that want to drive truck, work on a farm, work in a factory, wait tables, cook at restaurants. It seems like everywhere there's people that are struggling to get fully staffed these days.
I think a lot of people like that, maybe to work from home, maybe work on their computer for 4 hours a day. What do you think, guy? I think that's what we're finding. Yeah, we don't find a lot of people lining up to do anything real difficult. So,
well, I thought y'all were hiring that job.
Yeah, I hear you. That's what we always keep getting. People are like, "Oh, we want to work from." Yeah, we're out in California. We want to work from home, and I'm like, "Nah, we're good." So I don't know. Definitely,
it is a challenge. I do feel like there's some efficiencies to be gained, and there's some reasons and some certain industries where people can work from home and be very productive, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for certain businesses to put up great brick and mortar buildings. But at the same time, it's not for everything. It's kind of really hard to go sweep a grain bin remotely.
Yeah, I would agree.
So what about the plane business you guys own? Tell us a little bit more about that. Is that just strictly like crop spraying planes, or you have?
So we have ownership. We have ownership in an aerification business. We run They run 3 airplanes down there, and we do liquid chemistries, either fungicides, insecticides, or herbicide work. And then also we do a lot of dry fertilizer work out of the machines. And the machines are big. We have a 400-gallon machine, a 600-gallon, and an 800-gallon, and they're able to do variable rate dry work and variable rate liquid work too. So they're very advanced, and they can cover a lot of acres in a hurry. And like Dad said earlier, there's a lot of pressures here. So you might get into a 2-week wet spell, but guess what? The insects are still in the cotton, so you have to get them sprayed. And weeds still grow even though you can't get a ground machine across the field. But you know, if you get a ground machine across the field, sometimes you can do the job. But if you can't, I'd say lose a crop, but you can lose a lot of money very rapidly if you can't manage it tightly. And the the air business allows producers to just manage that risk and get caught up on things when they need to.
Is that something you guys bought into? Was that a pre-existing business you guys bought into, or?
It was a pre-existing business that we had purchased the assets and started a new one with, and it was a couple other producers and a pilot that we went together and started or continued, I guess, the business, and have grown it also.
As your dad said, anything you thought you might have to wait on, you just go ahead and, like us, invest in it and start your own, and away you go, right?
You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait anymore. And we put a warehouse in, or we purchased a building to warehouse all of our seed and chemicals for that same reason. We go ahead and get them all delivered pre-season when no one else is doing anything, and we have all of our chemistries and all of our seeds sitting there, waiting to be treated. We'll treat our own, and but that way, when it's time to go to the field, we're not sitting in line waiting for this, or they ran out of that product and it's in the next state, it'll be here in 2 days. We could just walk out there and go find it. Now, there's also inventory and cash flow reasons that you have to be careful with that, but it's from an operational standpoint and being able to execute when you have that window, it's been priceless for us.
Yeah. What's the next thing you guys are looking at? What are you going into next? Are you just going to try and get more and more efficient at the ones you got?
I think efficiency is it's just on the conversation that we've been talking about, the efficiencies of harvest, whether it's grain drying, grain storage, moving logistics. That whole piece is a big thing that we're going to have to focus on, and then it's the making sure that you can secure all your inputs when you need them. The last thing you want to do is have a big corn crop in the ground you can't get your fertilizer for, or you're ready to go harvest and there's no diesel fuel. There's a disruption in the diesel fuel chain and you can't get product and you lose a week. Unfortunately, I think infrastructure is going to allow us to continue to lower our cost of production and be much more efficient. Like I said, there's not a lot of people that are wanting to come work in any industry right now. So you've got a few people that can. You can't work them to death, but you need to work them as efficiently as possible to where they can get 2 or 3 times done. As I said, my brother and I, we carried 30-foot joints of aluminum and plastic pipe across a cornfield. We can't do that today. No one would ever make it. When we've got a lot more cornfields to carry it across also. We didn't have as many fields as we were trying to irrigate, but we roll out our poly pipe we do 100 miles of poly pipe every year with one crew. We just learned how to pick the efficiencies up, and I think that allows us to lower our costs, be more productive, and then allows for more growth, not only for the operation, but for the team that works here too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, tell me.
Where do you guys deliver into? Corn and beans?
All of our corn goes to the chicken feed mill industry in Mississippi, so we're a corn deficit state. There will be some corn that's exported just because of timing and storage. It goes to the port. We're very close to the port of New Orleans, relatively speaking. So that's where all of our soybeans go also.
So you got some good basis levels down there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're 45 minutes to the river, and everything gets put on a barge and shipped down the river.
Nice. So perfect.
Yeah,
the water.
Yeah.
I was
we got water.
I was looking on your guys' website and I noticed all the newsletters you guys do every quarter. When do you guys get started with that? Seems like you're pretty consistent with it as well.
Well, you would make my wife really happy by saying that. Elizabeth does the newsletters, and Dad and I chuckle. We write an article, we send it to her, and I think the only thing she leaves in the article is our name at the top.
Edits it really nice.
Yeah, she edits. It's kind of like when we got married. She edited all the stuff out of the house and all of her stuff in. Uh, but she does. So Elizabeth, just a little family background. Elizabeth does all the human resources and public relations. That also entails all the safety and compliance on the operation for both businesses. Stacie does all the marketing of the crops, all the financials, and I'd say risk management with insurance. Uh, but the newsletter and the social media has been Elizabeth's thing, especially the newsletter. She spends a lot of time making sure that goes out on every quarter. We did a couple of them before she came back, and if you go back to look at like the first two or three, I think that's one of the reasons she came to work with us because they were so poor. And she came back. She's like, "You got to do better than this," and she does. She does a really good job with them, and she tries. She grew up not working on a farm. She didn't grow up on a farm. Her dad was a stockbroker, and she grew up in a bigger city, so she has an understanding of what we take for advantage that everybody that I talk to knows what 28005 is, and she
Yeah.
understands that nobody that she talks to knows what that even is, or
Yeah.
what fertilizer is, or liquid fertilizer is, or fruit comes from the grocery store. So it's and I would say we've probably had more. We have numerous people. The newsletter it goes out all over the place, and we have people that are just very random. Have come by and met the farm one time, and have come by and seen us, and sign up for it, and they just thank us for informing them where their food comes from and informing them about agriculture. And I think that's the main thing that we do that for is just an outreach of education for agriculture.
Yeah, it seems like it's, and I've had some folks come up to me and ask, what do we do? And their kids or their daughter played on a softball team, or one guy's son played on a little league baseball team. And the parents that were coaching, I mean, just false information about food, false information about the farms, just so much craziness, from the media. It's tough to battle it, but it takes people like you, people like us to keep putting the word out there and try and tell people what really happens on the farm, what really happens with the food. And massively important. Again, tip my hat to you guys for putting that out, for sure. There's not enough of it. I know that.
Thank you.
Is there anything, about all I had to ask you guys, but anything else you guys wanted to share or talk about, or?
There's one thing that we kind of have a motto that I like to say that we live by. We have to do everything faster because we don't have as much time and nobody wants to work as long hours. We have to do it easier because nobody likes that hard work, that throwing the bales, square bales gets old. And we have to do it more reasonable or cheaper because that's how we're going to stay competitive in this world. And so everything we kind of do, we're driven by that. Of course, we try to be safety is a very, very, very important to this operation. As we get more people, you really have to be sure, as Jeremy said, you not only tell them what to do, but how to do everything to make sure it's done right. And we have to be more productive. I think that's the big thing is, as we look at all of our system, it's evolved, is how we grow rice has changed 5 or 6 times over 10 years, Jeremy. And the system we're using now does look nothing like the system we used 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's,
I almost would say some of our production systems are kind of like, you had the VHS, then the DVD, then you jump to Blu-ray and HD DVDs, and they lived a very short life till everyone just started streaming everything. That's how some of our practices are. It's like, wow, this is so much better than what we did 5 years ago. And it's like, well, that was a short-lived practice. We even found somewhere better to do than that. And that's a lot of what we've seen. And some of that is, I would say, just simple changes, maybe mindset changes, and some of it's technology allows us to do it. So, but whatever we can do, as Dad says, if we can do it quicker, cheaper, and safer, that's what we're looking at doing across the operation in a very sustainable way. Because Dad grew his farm for us. We want to grow our farm for the next generation, and we want that process to continue to go down the road. And that's kind of our mission statement is farming for the future. And I think that's what we're looking at. Everything is how can we be more productive and use less. It's not so we can spend more time playing golf on Tuesday afternoons at 2 o'clock. It's to make the operation sustainable long term for not only our family but the families that are affected by the operation.
I think one thing we can say across the board, resounding that we've heard from all the folks we do these with, and they're willing to give back, and they've all built multi-generational farming operations or ag businesses, is you're lucky, Jeremy, and the people we have on, your mom and dad sound like are open-minded to be looking for those things, to be looking for change and looking how to implement new things that are going to change the process, improve the process, and make it better for you and your brothers and sisters, and then for your guys' kids. So that really seems like the theme, don't you think, Jordan? Is the parents set the tone for being open to change and open and accepting and looking for ways to improve. We have some that I know that, they haven't changed in years and years and years, and they're not looking to change. They don't want to change. So I think that's one of the big keys that we're hearing is that the mom and dad were open and receptive to the change. Well, Al, look at Willard. I mean, moved from Canada down to Mississippi and took some risk and isn't afraid of risk, it doesn't sound like, and is willing to make some changes. So I think that's the key to a lot of success. So, Jordan.
Well, one more thing I will say with regard to that, when Jeremy first came back, we were slaying on some irrigation or something, and I said, no, we're going to change how we do that. He said, well, we've always did it that way. And I stopped him and I said, son, I never want to hear that out of your mouth again. I never want to hear you say, this is why we do it, because we've always done it this way. You look at it, and if there's a better way, do it. And I've always lived that.
Well, that's important. That's a great way to end it right there, Jordan. I don't think the message could be any clearer. And I've heard so many people, Willard, through the years tell us, when I'm out talking to them, like, well, that's how my daddy did it and his dad did it, and that's how we're going to keep doing it. And I'm just, okay, but you're living proof. I think that's the right way is what you're saying. So good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys taking the time to be on here with us. So
yeah, hopefully it helps some folks. And anytime you guys need anything or anything you need from us, we'd love to see you up in Kansas City anytime and come up to show or whatever we can do for you guys. Let us know.
Definitely, and the same here. Come by and see us sometime. I always highly recommend July. It's a beautiful time of year here. Everything's growing, and it's a fun time to come. It's a little warm.
We need to get down there when we got Ole Miss or Mississippi State playing the Razorbacks, playing the old Arkansas folks. So
there we go.
Yeah, Jordan's went to school there, so yeah, hey, we got to come down and check it out sometime. But
I don't know. That game is always raining and it's always cold.
Really? Wow. Yeah, I believe
the Arkansas game is always. The Arkansas State game is always miserably cold and raining, I would say.
Oh, heck, too funny. So, all right. Well, I appreciate it, Willard. Thank you, Jeremy, and best to you and your family. And thank you again for all your time.
Thanks for having us on.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Bye.